Chrono Cross is 20 years old now. Well, it's actually 21, almost 21, because it was originally released in Japan on November, I believe, 1999. But the North American localization, which is the version that I played and most of you played, was released on August 15 on the year 2000, 20 years ago. And as you already know, it is my absolute favorite video game of all time, and I told the story on how it made me an RPG addict and how it changed my life and how it's a game that probably is the reason why this channel exists. It isn't the first RPG I ever played in my life. That honor belongs to Final Fantasy Legend 2, also known as Saga 2 on the Game Boy. Several years later, I played Super Mario RPG, and I never knew back then what the RPG meant in this game. Like Super Mario Legend of the Seven Stars, but what does RPG mean? I didn't know that back then. So eventually I got my hands on Chrono Cross and enjoyed the heck out of it. Loved it with all my heart and soul, and no other video game in existence has ever made me feel what this game made me feel. It is such an important piece of art for me. It broke my heart, but it also changed my life. So my background with this game, it's a story that I've already shared here with you guys. I'll share it again just to give some background. But the next part, when it broke my heart and it just tore me to pieces, is something that I haven't told anybody. And I want to share that with you today to celebrate the 20th anniversary of this masterpiece. My story begins when I was 20 years old. I was in school and I had this friend of mine. He had a PlayStation, and back then, everybody was already playing the PlayStation 2, and we were almost at the PS3 era or the Xbox 360 era, and all I had was my NES, my Game Boy, and my Super Nintendo. That's all I had back then. And I wanted to get a PlayStation for the first time and get into all those amazing games some of my friends were just telling me about. So this friend of mine at school had a PlayStation and he wanted to sell it in order to buy an Xbox, the original Xbox. So I bought the PlayStation with 2 controllers, 2 memory cards, and like 30 games. Most of these games were like platformer, survival horror games, and fighting games. And well, the first 3 Resident Evil games were there, Silent Hill was there, and thanks to these games I became a huge die-hard fan of survival horror games. And that's all I wanted to play back then. I did give some of my free time to the other games, but mostly I was so into survival horror games. So the first thing I did after buying the PlayStation and playing the heck out of these games, I started going to this flea market where I knew there was a couple of booths where they had all the great games on the PlayStation. And during one of those journeys into this flea market, I found Parasite Eve 2. I didn't know anything about it. All I knew is that it looked like a survival horror game. And still nowadays, I think of Parasite Eve 2 as a survival horror game more so than an RPG. I mean, I don't know, if it's one of those games where it's hard to tell if it's really a role-playing game or not. But the point is that I played the game, and after the second boss battle, I believe, I just couldn't get into it. I didn't like the game at all, and I was like, I hadn't played Parasite Eve 1 first. I played that game several years later. So I went back to trade this game for something else, and I traded the game, I don't even remember what for. So I moved to another booth, and they had a bunch of PlayStation games as well. And my original aim was to buy a game that had the option to play with somebody else, a 2-player game. Precisely because I wanted to play with my sister. She wasn't exactly a gamer, but she did enjoy video games. We grew up with the NES and the Super NES and the Game Boy, and I wanted to play something with her other than some of the Crash games or some of the other 2-player games that I had. So I started, searching through the games, and well, I found this one. And by the looks of the cover, there were 2 characters there, these 2 guys, and I didn't know anything about them. And it didn't have a back cover. So I was like, what kind of game is this? I asked the seller, and he didn't know. He didn't even know if it was a 2-player mode game. And for some reason, I convinced myself that it was a 2-player game, like an action game or like a beat 'em up of some sorts. And so I bought the game, but mostly because I just couldn't stop staring at it. Not because it's such an amazing cover, because it is, but there was just something about it that kept calling me, like hypnotized me. And I'm not kidding, like I stare at the game. I remember staring at the game for like a minute or two, just saying like, what's going on? Like, like I needed the game. So I took it home and thinking that I'm gonna play this with my sister. So when I got home, my sister wasn't there. I put the game and it showed this amazing title screen with this eerie, hypnotizing, beautiful music. It's called The Garden of the Gods, the theme, composed by Yasunori Mitsuda. And this gave me some really mesmerizing sensation, something that I just can't explain. That title screen, when it shows press the start button, I was just mesmerized, completely hypnotized. So I clicked start and it threw me straight into the elevator part where Sergi, the main character, is with two other characters. One of them is Kid, the second main character, the main heroine of the game, and I couldn't believe it. It just gave me some Super Mario RPG vibes. And later I noticed both games had the same logo. Like I said, Squaresoft, and I remember, okay, so maybe it's a game made by the same people. So I started noticing the similarities, the battle system, the dialogue, the conversations, and eventually I was like, this is just like Final Fantasy Legend 2. This is just like Super Mario RPG. That day, I couldn't stop playing the game. All day, man, all day. I think I got home by 2 p.m. and it was late at night, like 1 a.m. already. I was still playing the game. I love the game. I finished this game in like a period of 2 or 3 weeks, and I fell in love with it. The characters, the music, oh my god, it clicked a lot with me. Before this game, video game music was totally meaningless. Sure, there were some catchy themes in previous video games that I had played, but I didn't give a shit about that. But this game made me change my mind on that, made me pay attention to video game music. And also, the graphics, the battle system, the story, everything about this game just resonated with me in a deep, very deep level that I just can't explain. And now I want to get to the part where the game broke my heart, changed my life, made me an RPG addict, an RPG gamer, and just also helped into wanting to make better music. I was a musician, in case you didn't know I was, and also to write better stories. And it's also the reason why how this game broke my heart and just shattered my feelings. It's also the reason why I'm not a big fan of Chrono Trigger. You'll understand why. I'm not gonna spoil the game, don't worry. I'm not gonna spoil the ending in case you haven't played this game. But if you have, and if you finish this game, you probably already know what I'm gonna say. How this wholesome journey, full of, a lot of tough decisions, heartbreaking moments, and beautiful music that just is perfect for every single scene, every single character, every single moment. It just creates something that entangles you and makes you bond with this game. You create a strong bond with this game. So when you get to that ending and experience the ending of that game, you're in tears, man. Even if you're not literally crying, your heart, your soul is crying. You're like, why? Why is this happening? And it's not exactly a tragic ending, but it's such a beautiful ending, beautifully sad ending. And that's what broke me, because before this, I had never played such a beautiful story before with such strong and rich main characters. Like the moment Kid shows up in the game, I've never been a fan of her outfit, but her personality, I don't know, there was something about her, something about Kid that back then I felt like she was kind of like missing in my life. Even though Serge is a silent protagonist, I related immediately to him. He was dead in another world, in another dimension. And it's not like I was some kind of emo kid back then, but I did go through some shit in my life, and I kind of felt dead inside. So I completely related to this character and how Kid appeared in his life with her own quest, her own troubles, trying to, be with him and help him and also distract him from all the shit he was going through, all that confusion. It just resonated with me, man. That's what happened to me. So this relationship between these two characters, along with the overall story, the background of the game, and how little by little you start discovering a little bit more about these characters and what's going on in this island, in this archipelago. The moment you start getting closer to the truth is the moment you start kind of like growing up inside. Like you're trying to find all the answers that you needed to move on in life. And that's what happened to me with this game. I love this game and I enjoyed it to pieces on a very personal level. This is a game that has several endings, several routes, and I found out I got stuck in one of these parts, so I looked up a walkthrough. There were already guides back then on the internet, but there were like 2 or 3 guides in the entire internet. So I read this guide and I knew what I had to do, but it was that moment when I read that guide that I found out that there were a lot of characters and decisions to make and routes. Like, this is our true role-playing game where your decisions matter, really affect the gameplay, the outcome, and everything. So, small spoilers here. Let's just say that a kid gets injured at some point of the game and you need to decide if you're gonna rescue her, if you're gonna find a way to save her, or to move on. That particular moment was very important to me because nowadays most of these RPGs we've already played are like very romantic, a lot of romance in video games. You know the drill, right? You know this already. Classic JRPG romance, but this was the very first time I experienced something like that. So that was like, I didn't even think about it. I chose to try to find a way to save her, and when you finally do, it's like she comes back into your party, and I don't know. It's just something very beautiful, and it's some kind of joy that it's hard to express because it's so cheesy, and it's something that you've seen, like I said before, in many other JRPGs already. But my first time seeing something like that in a video game, that was magical. So I got into a part where you're about to enter a fort, and the game stopped working. The disc was crashed. It didn't work anymore. I tried a million times. I was desperately trying to continue the game. I took out the disc. I put it on the fridge. I don't know what I did. I did a million things to make the disc work because the flea market was so far away, and I knew that this was a rare game. I hadn't seen this game anywhere. So my chances of going back to the flea market and finding this game again were very slim. The disc just didn't work anymore. And I was torn apart. I was torn to pieces. I couldn't believe it because I was so into it. I was completely mesmerized and in love with this game that the moment it stopped working, something broke inside of me. I went back to the flea market. I couldn't find another copy. I don't know what happened. I went back home completely crushed. I didn't know what to do. I was getting ready to move on to another game, and call it a miracle. I'm not a religious type of person, but the moment I went back home and put the disc back in, it miraculously worked. I can't explain that. Don't ask me. I didn't get a different copy. I did nothing different with the disc. It just worked. And it didn't stop working until the end. Nothing happened. I beat the game. I loved it to pieces, man. After I beat this game, I obviously went back to other games, but every now and then, very frequently, almost every day, I will go back to it to play something different, like a different route, try to get a different ending, and I did everything there is to be done in this game, man. All of my characters, every single one of them, all 45 characters, level 99. I abused that little spatial distortion area that it's on an island, that secret place where you fight a certain secret battle with some characters from Chrono Trigger. I did everything there is to be done in this game, but that ending, man, the real original canon ending broke my heart. It just tore me apart. I couldn't believe it. I'm not gonna spoil the ending, don't worry. It's just, before you go into the final battle in this game, you realize you kind of get an idea of what you're going to get through, or what's gonna happen, if you beat this final boss. And as soon as it happened, probably just like many of you, I was expecting another thing to happen, like something predictable, like a true love story, and it just didn't happen. It completely destroyed me. I cried. I couldn't understand why the developers had made this decision. I thought I had gotten some kind of different ending. Looked it up online. That was a true canon ending. And I did other endings, like a different variation of the same ending there is in this game, and nope, it's a very similar outcome. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. You know, all the journey, all the emotional journey that I had gone through with these characters, and in my personal life at that moment, I was into some. I was like expecting some kind of hope, like a happy ending, and it just didn't happen. The game didn't give the ending to me, and it left like a void in my soul. And that's probably the reason I just couldn't let go of the game until several months later, when I finally got my hands into another game that saved me from the depression and obsession with this game, which was Final Fantasy IX. But that's a story for another day. Chrono Cross broke me, and of course, eventually I forgave the game. I was so mad at the game. I was so mad because I was just playing over and over again. I didn't want to let go. I wanted to go through the story again and experience the journey in all different points of view with these characters, just to see if I will get a different outcome at the end. And it just didn't happen, man. It didn't happen. So that's my story. That's how this game just screwed me over, and also made me hypnotized and changed my life. After this game, Final Fantasy IX is another masterpiece, and it's another game that delivered, not at the same level, but emotionally speaking, it also moved my heart. And then I played games like Final Fantasy VII, another really emotional story. Eventually, I got into games like Xenogears, and so on. So I became a hardcore RPG fan. I wouldn't play anything else. Sometimes I will go back to other survival horror games or fighting games or other genres, but like 90% of the time I was just playing RPG after RPG after RPG, and it's remained that way until today, that I'm still doing the exact same thing, all thanks to this excellent masterpiece. And how this game broke my heart and how this game changed me is probably the reason why I didn't love Chrono Trigger, because I played this game first, and Chrono Trigger, even though it is a very good story, it's just very different. Those two games, story-wise, I don't think they can be compared that much, because they're completely different. Even the writer himself, Masato Kato, has said, this is not Chrono Trigger 2, this is something completely different, and something very personal to him in his personal life. So it was a very personal project, and if you played both games, you can tell that. Even if you don't like Chrono Cross, you can tell it's something very different, on a different level. Not superior, not inferior, just different. So Chrono Trigger didn't give what Chrono Cross did, not even remotely what this game did for me. I still think Chrono Trigger is a great game, but Chrono Cross is like 10 times better in my opinion, just because of that on a personal level. And this is my story. This is how this game changed me, broke me, composed me, fixed me. It did everything with me, and now it's like a big, extremely important part of myself on a personal level. That's my story. Let's celebrate with whatever experiences you have on the comment section the 20th anniversary of this amazing masterpiece, my favorite RPG of all time. Thank you very much for watching.